Well, good evening, USPCA members. Welcome to our periodic webinars with some exciting information. And I am really excited about tonight's presentation. We have Amanda Richardson with us, and I've been talking with Amanda now for, it seems like forever, pretty close to it. But we had some exciting dialogue around personal branding and photography coming up on the convention. She's worked with a number of our members, just has some great messaging. And, you know, I'm not going to suck up a lot of time. I think everybody who got the invitation and accepted tonight and is registered has read the background, so she knows what it is, and they know all about you. So it's great, Amanda. I think we're in great shape there. So what I really want to do, I'm going to kind of go into hiding here, as I do every one of these that I do, and turn it over to you. But I want to remind everybody a couple of housekeeping items before we do. Is that if you scroll down to the bottom of your screen, you're going to see one thing for Q&A and another for chat. You can place your questions either in Q&A or in chat. And in fact, we start already, so Deb Cantrell says, hi, Amanda. So it works. So as we go along here, I'll be monitoring that. I'm going to let Amanda get through her presentation, and then we'll go ahead and start working on the chat and Q&A. From a process perspective, part one tonight is going to be on personal branding. Part two will be on photography. So it's a great way, I think, to kind of kick off with the personal branding, and then you figure out with the photography how to bring that to life. So without further ado, I want to be able to turn this over to Amanda, and I'm excited. By the way, the one last thing, this is what happens when you go live and you don't have a script, is that Amanda was also supposed to be one of our top presenters at the conference this year, and she has graciously understood why we had to move it to 2021, and I've already cornered her about coming back in 2021. So those of you who are on tonight get a very lucky preview of what we were going to talk about at the conference. So Amanda, I've run out of things to remember. I'm turning it back over to you now.
Okay, thank you, Larry. All right, thank you so much for having me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with everyone so that you can follow along. And then at the end of this, you'll get all of the slides. So let's make sure. We have Larry's face up there still, I think.
People can make that go away. Just reduce the picture.
Oh.
I apologize. In my practical joke way at the office, I tend to change my my photo, and I forgot I did one specifically for COVID. So.
Oh, that's too funny.
Ignore me. It looks. I look far worse live.
All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is personal culinary branding. And in order to talk about, and by the way, I say a lot, and I sincerely apologize for it. So hopefully it's not a drinking game, because you'll be really drunk by the end. Anyway, so the first thing that I want to talk about is personal branding itself, by itself, and what that means to your business. And the reason that I am such a big supporter of personal branding is for several different reasons. So the first is that personal branding can't be duplicated. In my business, the brand that I've built around myself is that it's about me. So I'm a brand name. My name is the brand, and I share not only about my business, but about personal things as well. And there's a fine line there. You don't want to share about yourself. You don't want to overshare, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So you don't want to overshare about things, but you also don't want to not share anything, because then you're not as relatable to your public. The other thing about personal branding is that it makes you stand out because you are the brand, and basically nobody can copy you. And as you know, in the culinary world, it's a very oversaturated market to begin with. So it makes you stand out above the others. So, you know, you talk to 1,000 people, only about 10% of the people are going to pull the trigger and do these things that will make a difference. So you're going to stand out above the ones that aren't going to pull that trigger. It also saves you money, which is a really great thing. Personal brand personal brand marketing is basically going to cost you time as opposed to money. There's a value there that you can't really put a price tag on, and it's better than doing shows, and it's better than doing mass marketing where you're just kind of like putting an ad in a online, or you're putting an ad in a paper or anything like that. So it's saving you money, it's saving, and you're putting in your time, and your time is valuable, obviously. So you're also, the last and most important thing is that you're going to be seen as genuine. So you're creating an authentic brand because you're sharing about yourself, and people are getting to know who you are. And hopefully you're understanding that I don't do a ton of personal speaking. So I'm going to walk you through now personal culinary branding. And there is a difference. And the reason for that is that it tells a story. So for culinary branding, and I did this when I was a personal chef, I share about what food means to me and how it relates to me personally. So I'll tell you a little story about my mom. So when I was growing up, my parents divorced when I was about 5 years old. And my parents didn't have the best, divorced relationship ever. However, I always remembered the nice things that my dad would say about my mom. And he would always talk about my mom's eggplant parmesan. My mom couldn't cook to save her life, but she could make the best eggplant parmesan. And this is coming from an Italian, I grew up in a very Italian house. My grandfather came over from Italy, and we were very much in the culture of Italian cuisine and cooking and all of that. So for him to say that this was something that was out of this world, it was saying something. So my mom, but I never remembered my mom making it for me. And so probably a few years ago, I guess it would have to be 4 or 5 years ago now, I asked her to make it, and it was great. And so now just fast forward to just recently, actually in January of this year, my mom had to go into a nursing home. And she has severe dementia, so she'll never remember the recipe or anything like that. But what happened was I was feeling, nostalgic and sentimental, and I was doing a shoot for something else, and so decided to use eggplant parmesan as just something for an example for something. And so what I ended up doing, and I'm going to actually show it to you, is I took the picture, and then I posted it on, I think I just posted it on something on Facebook, and I just said, it was in honor of my mom. I didn't really tell the story too much at that point. And what happened was people started asking me for the recipe, and so I ended up telling the story, and I had already posted some blog posts about, what had happened with her, and shared that part of my life. So those that followed me already kind of knew some of it, some of the background. So, but it was a way that people really engaged with it. And it's actually one of my most popular posts on my Facebook page. So it just kind of really wraps, it gets people to relate to you. It's marketing to them, and they don't even know that they're being marketed to. And you as chefs, now I'm not a chef, so I'm just taking the pictures. But you as chefs are you're creating that dish and you're wanting to market yourself to sell that food. So you telling a story of your mom, you know, who's sick, someone else's mom is sick as well, and they're relating to that, and they're able to, and I still actually get a ton of responses when I post things about her, because people can relate to it. So it's definitely something that works. I will tell you, it takes time to really establish that brand. It takes time to for people to start connecting, and some things won't catch. So you're going to have some things that you talk about that you think are, you know, funny and hilarious, and or that you want it to be part of your personal brand, and it's not going to catch. And then there are going to be other little tiny things that catch that just don't make sense to you, but everybody kind of relates to them. So that being said, what we do is we're going to set up a personal brand marketing strategy. So in order to do that, I like Planoly. If you don't have any type of online management system, this is what I use personally. I like it because you can see the grid on the side, and I like to have the control over, it doesn't, you can auto post with it, but it doesn't automatically, like you can shut that feature off, and I shut it off, and it will alert me on my phone when it's time to send out the message. And basically you just do it manually, and it's a fantastic way to keep track of things. I just like having more control. So you can upload it's also free. So with the free version, you can upload 30 pictures per month. And on top of that, within those controls, that you can then also post it to your Facebook. So it's, you know, automatically, just like Instagram. So I suggest using Planoly, but if you use another management system, obviously just stick with that. My next suggestion is to plan out 2 posts per week. Now, I have to tell you, I'm not necessarily practicing what I preach all the time. I can look at it from a big picture point of view a lot better than I can look at it for myself. I always joke with people that I have to hire myself to do my own stuff. But you should, and you can start even just once a week if that's easier for you. I think right now I'm at once a week. But twice a week. And it doesn't have to, I'm not saying to always do personal. So I'm suggesting, you know, 1 post a month that's personal, but 2 posts per week. And they can relate back, unless you're running a campaign or something, they can relate back to this personal message that you're trying to build. So say that you're trying to run a campaign for cookies, chocolate chip cookies that your grandmother used to make. And so you want to tell this story, and you can break it into parts and tell, you know, each week you can tell a part of this story and build up to that. And then you're not necessarily going to run a sale for the cookies, because people are going to want them so much anyway, that they're, because of the branding that you've done and the buildup that you've done, that you're going to then be able to almost increase the price if you really wanted to. But anyway, you're going to start with 2 posts per month. I'm kind of getting away from myself. You're going to, like I said, choose an image at least once a month that's personal to you. And actually, I say probably about once a month, you want to put a picture of your face. You want people to see your face. And you'd be surprised, I bet, if you go back through your feed, if you've posted pictures of your face, you probably get a lot more likes and responses to those than you do to ones that don't include some kind of personal content. Even as photographers, in photography groups I'm a part of, we all talk about how how interesting that is, because of course I'm connected with a lot of wedding photographers, and they show these beautiful epic photos of weddings and everything, and they're like, and the biggest comments I got were the pictures of me and my little baby, or whatever the case may be. So but you, as culinary, in the culinary world, you really have an advantage because you can use your food to also tell a story. So you really have an advantage there. And again, I just talked about this. Other images throughout the month should be either built around showing off your food or your client experience. And I know right now that's a little bit of a challenge. So, do what you can there. And I would say if you are building up to launching something, I would honestly try to build all of your posts around that for the month. If it's something that's, if you're really trying to ramp up to something, the more information people get and the more you show up, the better it is. The other thing I didn't say, but it was on the slide there, is that, and this is from the experts, this is not me being a social media manager or anything, but I have heard that it is better to post your social media information regularly and at the same time. So if you're doing it on, Mondays at 4 p.m., always do it on Mondays at 4 p.m. And it does help build that SEO, and it helps all those technical things in the background that go on. The most important thing is to maximize the content. And the reason for this is obvious. And we're going to talk a lot, next about pictures and everything else, but you really want to maximize quality content. So take time to take the pictures, take time to think out the posts, and take time to map it out, and take a moment to look at that planoly, because it gives you the grid so you can see what it's going to look like once everything's posted. So that you can make sure that everything's flowing nicely and you don't have any craziness, in your grid. Don't be afraid to delete things out of your grid. Those are probably the top. Not being afraid to delete things is a big one, actually. I go through mine occasionally and delete things, and I hate doing it because sometimes you do have comments or you have likes or whatever, and you can just archive them. You don't necessarily have to delete them completely. And then anything crazy, you can always put in your story and then put on your highlight too. So don't forget that you have those features as well. And you have stories in Facebook as well. I'm not really as familiar with stories on Facebook. I don't use them as much, but sorry. So if you have any questions about personal branding, we're going to kind of take a moment and just answer any questions you might have. And then, I don't know, Larry, if you can.
I'll kick back in here. We have a couple questions, but if I could, kind of starting off, I actually have one. I was thinking as you were talking, Amanda, the whole personal side of personal chef. It's a lot different than when you're in a commercial environment where perhaps the stories and the pictures, tend to swirl around a facility, certain kind of food, but you never get real personal about it. And I was thinking, as you were talking, particularly as people are thinking about, the next thing they're going to launch, where they get ready, that with everybody in this COVID time and people in different phases of their business, and now potentially while things are getting ready to open up, a lot of people have been doing some volunteer work and have been doing some creative things in their community. Is there value in posting that and getting some good pictures? And should you be in those? Does it come across as self-serving if you're in those pictures? How do you present that?
Oh, I don't think it's self-serving at all. I think showing that you're reaching out to your community is fantastic. And it shows, again, that personal, I always keep that in mind, is you can't duplicate yourself. Someone can copy you, someone else can post about how they're volunteering, but it's not the same thing as you're doing. So, and being in the pictures, I think it's great to post something. Again, I keep my feed a little bit more curated in terms of what you're putting on the feed as opposed to what you're putting in the stories. And again, so like just a quick snapshot selfie of you and someone and you're helping and this is great. I think that's a great thing for a story. And then if you want to keep it and say, here's all my volunteer work and put it on your highlight, I think that's a great way to utilize that content because all your volunteer stuff is right there. And then keeping your feed, not necessarily to say you wouldn't put a picture of yourself, but, you know, having more thoughtful pictures in there.
Sure. That's great. Thank you. I have a couple questions. Chef Kathy asks, can you elaborate on oversharing in terms of personal branding? What would be a good example of that?
Oversharing would probably be like, you know, like my dishes aren't done, you know, more like complaining, I think is more that you don't want to come across like you're just telling everybody like everything about your life. You know, it's not that you don't want to like create, you know, you're trying to be authentic. So there's that fine line, but you also don't want to be like, my dishes aren't done and my kids are a mess and, you know, I haven't taken a shower in 3 days, you know, like there's certain things that you want to still be professional, you know.
You're going over the personal deep end in essence.
Yeah. You want to be personally professional. Like that would be a good
That's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Kathy, I hope that answers the question for you. Chef Mandy asks, hello, Amanda. You talked about your name being the name of your business, and that's your personal brand. How does it work when your name is not part of your business name? How do you personalize this? How do you develop the brand in this situation? And thank you very much for your reply.
Yes, so that's actually a fantastic question because I struggled really hard. Actually, I've struggled just during this, so she's not alone. I've struggled really hard keeping my name as the brand name because there's a part where it depends how you're going to scale your business. And if you're going to scale your business to be more than just you know, you're going to be multifaceted. And although you're a personal chef, you're going to have this over here and you're going to do dinner parties over here and all of that. So that's a great question. And the way I would answer it is you're still the CEO. You're still the brand. You can still be your own personal brand and you can still, you're the moral compass, moral center of your business. So you're going to be sharing, you know, about your life and your family. It's still going to attract people. It's still going to be relatable and authentic. And you're going to probably incorporate your interactions with your staff more. That's where I think that would come in, is you're going to be more personal in relating to how to relate to your staff and how your staff can share as well. So, but you want to be careful with that. Like you don't want to be encouraging your staff to be sharing personally if they don't know how to do it properly, because that goes back to the oversharing.
That's okay, because I just got a note from one of our staffers that everyone's looking at my nose. So my apologies for that. I didn't have my own video up, so my own fault. So next question from Chef Joel. How do you decide what to place on a feed story?
So again, the feed for me is a little bit more curated, meaning it's like, so the pictures that we're going to talk about taking, if you're taking your time and it's a good picture and you've edited it, that would go in your feed. So it's also you want to be remembering that you're adding content to those pictures too. So people are using Instagram now as like mini blog posts because people do read them. And if you catch someone's attention with a picture and then you're offering some content in there that's valuable or relatable, you're basically mini blogging to people. And so it's what you want to say about the image, or it's how you want to relate to people. That's what you're putting in your feed. In terms of what you're putting in your stories, that's more, I would say, of the day-to-day personal, like selfies or my dog's being goofy or something like that. You don't necessarily want that in your feed, because if you think about a client landing on your feed, that's where they're going to go. They're not going to necessarily go to your story right away because they might not be connected to you. But they're going to go to your feed and see what you've been doing.
Welcome to working from home.
I'm sorry?
And you get the background noise when you work from home.
Yeah. So that's what is going on your feed, is that you're offering a lot more content. It's more business related, but it's relatable content. And I know it's a fine line, and I'm kind of blurring those lines for you, but there is a technique to it. And it works really well when you perfect it.
Perfect. Chef Shirley has a great question. It says, what if your name is in your brand, but you have scaled up so that the staff does a lot of the work? Do you add them to the personal information?
Yes, I would say you can add them to the personal information. I think maybe talk with Chef Deb, because she might have some help for them in terms of maybe needing to change the name too. I would say that, you want to relate to your staff. You want to share about your staff more. You want to share about relating to your staff. I wouldn't say you want to be sharing personal things about your staff. I think you're only going to share about yourself because you're the person, you're the CEO, you're the person that's in charge of it all, and you want to be relatable to people. So I think having your name in your brand it's a fine line. It's difficult. It's hard to get people excited about working with someone that isn't you when you're the name. So that's when you've scaled up. Sometimes you have to think about rebranding.
It is a piece, and as you're saying that, I was thinking back to my days working for Disney. And Walt Disney was dead long before I got there. So we were all some personification of who Walt Disney was. But the likenesses and the stories, running Disney Institute, the stories we told were all built on what Walt talked about. And so keeping that original name, the Walt Disney Company, keeping the Walt Disney alive. And I think that's the piece of it too. And you tell me if I'm wrong on this, but when we talk about even your name isn't in your brand. Brand is more than just the name, right? It's we always used to say touching the hearts and minds of your customers and your employees and yourself. And so I think that's why this becomes so powerful, because these personal stories are doing just that. So even if your name's not in the brand being, in this particular case, is much bigger than that. It's not in the name of the company, but the brand by itself is touching everybody. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's the value of it's your values, it's your business values, it's your business mission, it's everything all combined into one. I would absolutely agree with that, because you're like the umbrella over everything else.
Yep. And just, Chef Jacob asked a question, but it's really more along the lines of what we're doing and some things in COVID. So I'm going to answer that one separately while you're on your next presentation. So Chef Jacob, just bear with me for a moment and I'll type in my answer. But I think, let me make sure that covers our questions for this session. And then, wait a minute, we have more.
Okay. One other thing I wanted to just dawned on me, and speaking about COVID, is this is a great time to kind of build your personal brand, to be honest with you, because you have the time. If you're not working with clients right now, it's a great time, because it does take time. I'm talking like it takes a good solid 6 months to really build up enough to, connect with people and have them start interacting about different things about yourself. blogging plays a huge role in that. I didn't touch on that here because, you know, we have limited time, but it's something that I talk a lot about when I work with clients. So.
Perfect. And Chef Beverly asked, is personal branding one main product you provide, or is the name of the business, or is it just the name of the business?
I don't think I understand the question.
No, I'll read it exactly, and then Chef Beverly wants to write a clarification. I'll get her to push this in here. But it says, is personal branding one main product that you provide, or the name of the business? So I think she's looking at the name Amanda Richardson and asking, is that personal branding just the product, or is it do you do more than just the personal branding? And I think that's what we're getting ready to go
Well, I'm actually a photographer. Yeah, so I'm a photographer, and I have wrapped in. I've actually taken a lot of classes before I even started this journey. I started taking a lot of business classes and a lot of marketing and understanding. And I have a degree in business, but that of course doesn't help you after all these years, right? The whole world has changed, so I feel like I needed to re-educate myself, you know. No, I'm a photographer by trade, and then I wrap in personal culinary branding to how I work with clients. And I actually changed things a little bit during this time because there was time to take a breath and look at everything. And I found that I was actually, with a lot of my clients, doing this anyway. So I ended up making it part of my entire photography experience. So I work with everyone now that works with me does personal branding too. So.
Well, perfect. I think that covers our questions for this session, but you have more.
I do.
So at this, I'm turning the screens back over to you.
Okay.
I'll put my weird COVID picture back up, and I'll be back when it comes time for Q&A.
Okay, perfect. All right. All right, so we're going to talk about iPHOTOS now. So the first thing you're going to do is download the Lightroom app. And the reason that we're going to use this app, and you don't have to do it right now, but just so that you know, this is the type of app that Lightroom is actually what we use to edit photos as photographers for the most part. And I pretty much will use this app whenever I'm taking, if I have to take a picture with my phone, which, to be honest with you, it's been a long time. I created a guide that I've actually incorporated into these slides. And so when I created the guide, I had to go back and actually relearn how to use this. So, but anyway, so we're going to download this app. So everything that I talk about on here is going to be based off of this app. So just so that you know that. It is a free app. You can download it with iPhone or Android. It should be seamless. So, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is setting up your scene. So the first and foremost, make sure you have time. So, because even I do it. I mean, I'm guilty of it sometimes. Like, if I'm just trying to take something quick, you know, and I mean, nothing that I would post, but if I'm sending it to my husband or something, because he's overseas, so I show him what I've been making or something. I'll take a quick picture. And if you don't give yourself time to take the picture, it'll come out like crap. Just honest. The other thing you want to make sure of is that you have a lot of natural light. You want to turn off your overhead lighting, and you want to turn off your flash. Don't ever use your flash. And the reason for the not using the flash is because everything will look washed out and very flat, and it's just very unappealing. It can have a gray or yellow tone to it depending on what other kind of lighting you have going on. So anyway, just stay away from your flash and your overhead lights. You can even take it outside. So either by a window or you can go outside in a shaded area. You want diffused natural light. And what I mean by diffused is, actually, it's a perfect example. I was just about to close the shades and then I knew I was going to be saying this. So, so you can see on my face here, there's like really harsh, this is harsh light, and then I've got a shadow. So you can see the difference. You don't want to have harsh shadows coming across your food or anything that you're trying to take a picture of. And now I need to close these because it's blinding me. So, hold on. I'm so sorry. But natural light is much whiter. So you always want that white balance, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So the light that I have here beside me is much more yellow. And of course the light lamp shade will make the lighting yellow as well. So your natural light, you want to diffuse it if you can with a curtain. That's even better, a white sheer curtain. Sometimes you can even makeshift something. You can put a white tablecloth over your window. If you can do something like that, that's even better. And you want to diffuse so that you're not getting any harsh shadows. That is first and foremost. Lighting is basically the number one thing with taking any kind of photo. If you remember anything or just taking any photo of you or yourself or anything, just remember that lighting is key. The other thing about lighting is where you're going to position yourself. Some of this isn't on the slide because I'll start rolling and I can talk about it forever. So, so the next thing is positioning to the light. So when you're taking a picture, and let's say that you do have a little bit of harsh light, but it's not too bad, and you want to get in front of it. So what I mean by that is you want the shadow to be facing you. So I have, the light is here, and this is my plate of food. And so I would take the picture from here so that the shadow is facing me, or maybe a little to the side so you're catching a little bit of glow on the side. And that's why we diffuse the light and dull it down, basically, because when we do that, we're not blowing out the back. We call it blowing out the background. So we're not overexposing the background with all the light, and then the dish would look dark. So as much diffused, and you always want the shadow to be facing you. So even if you're taking a picture of your child outside, if you're standing outside and you want to get a good picture, and it's harsh daylight out, you want to have them face their shadow and take a picture. Just a little extra tip. So the next thing is control setting. And then, let's see, did we go through all of those? Okay, so setting it up, we're going to want a tablecloth, some kind of texture in the background. So when we're talking about anything in the background, you're going to put your plate on a wooden surface, a cement. Cement is actually, to be honest with you, it's a great surface because cement is white and it's reflective. So that's a great way to get a bright photo, and it's textured. So kind of get all the greatness of all the worlds. Now, if you're going to use a lighter background, you're going to want to use a darker plate to have that contrast, but we'll talk about color contrast. And then finally, you want to stay away from your reflective surfaces. So what I mean by this is not only a stainless steel countertop, but also your silverware, plates, that type of thing. You want to use as much matte as you can. So And when I talk about silverware, I mean, obviously, if you're going to have silverware in the photo, you know, just try to strategically place it so that you're not catching either the light or the reflection of the phone. So that's a big one. Okay, so styling. And I'm really just going to do basics here because, you know, we can get pretty complicated with this stuff, and I don't feel like that's the best use of your time. I feel like if you can apply these few things that I'm going, and you'll get these slides at the end so that you can, you know, use them at your leisure. And so I don't feel like it's the best use of your time to get really super detailed, but if you can at least apply what I'm teaching here, and of course, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer emails. Then this will at least get you the basics and get you something to put into Instagram feed and have fun with. So the first thing you're going to do when you're styling up your plate is to use, like, plate your dish less than you normally would. Now, you're going to use a smaller plate than you normally would. So this plate here is actually a salad plate. And then you know, it's a very, and you'll see it in the next slide, but there's not a lot going on the plate. You know, you don't want a ton going on. And you're going to want to contrast your backgrounds. Now, in this image, I have a textured napkin, I have a wood background, but they're not colored because I have a tremendous amount of color going on in the dish. So you don't want, you know, you really don't want both going on. So I'll be honest with you, I think when I was taking this photo, and I took this with my phone, I used a green to try to pull the green, and it did not work. Now keep in mind, when you do use a color of any kind, so if you're going to use, say this was a, I don't know, a piece of like pork loin or something, it's more brown, and so you're going to use a color pop for a napkin or something. Say you're, for whatever reason, you're using red or bright pink, those tones are going to, like a white plate is going to suck the color of those tones in. So you're definitely not going to, you're going to have a lot more editing problems. So it's best to use kind of dull, again, matted, muted colors to contrast things. You want to allow the sauces to naturally spill over. It's really difficult to get to strategically make something look natural, if that makes sense. So you don't want to be as careful as you think you might want to be when you're drizzling sauce or something. And I know it's really nerve-wracking when you have something that it's like a one and done. So again, this is where you want to have as much time as possible to do something like that. In terms of things spilling over, I just caught what I wrote there. Yeah, I was actually, this plate was covered in red, watery sauce. It looked terrible. So I was constantly absorbing the watery red with a paper towel and then wiping it. So you're always going to want to like clean off whatever you can underneath to make it look as clean as possible. And again, choosing simple tableware and dishes. Most likely you have a lot of white on hand, or if not, you know, whatever you have. This plate is rather reflective. This is not a matte color plate, but I would suggest using that, you know, not as shiny flatware if possible. You can also layer, so layering gets a little bit more detailed, but you could have like a charger underneath this, and that's where you could have a little bit more color pop and forget the napkin, or, you know, I mean, you can play with it and have fun with it. Okay, so next, is styling. And we're gonna, the reason I'm using this picture here is just to show, I call it the yum factor. This shows like your eye obviously immediately goes to the drizzling frosting in the middle. And that's, you know, we're focusing on that. I could have actually cropped this in so that, you know, on Instagram or something, if you were trying to really focus on, you know, you're trying to focus on selling the frosting or something like that, then you could crop that in completely and make it just about the frosting itself. And that's, yeah, people really respond to stuff like that. The reason I didn't crop it is just to show you a little bit more about color. So this is, and this I did not take with my phone. But the reason that this photo works with the dark on dark is because of the powdered sugar. And so if I didn't have the powdered sugar to contrast the black, because it's a black background and a black cake, if I didn't have that white to go with the white frosting, it would not work. It would completely blend in, the red would look silly. I also wanted to show you that the plates kind of pull in the color. If I actually had to reshoot this picture, I'll be honest with you, I would push those plates closer because it's always bugged me about this picture. But it helps bring the picture together. There's also a little teeny tiny bit of color in the background as well. And so it helps kind of keep your eye. It's like that diagonal that we talk about in photography. There are lines in photography. And so this is along the diagonal. So it keeps your eye, it's pleasing to the eye. So capturing the color contrast, but it's not a lot of color. So that was the other thing I'm trying to, you know, highlight there, is that we don't want a ton of color. We don't want a ton going on in the picture. You just want it as simple as possible. It makes it a lot more pleasing to the eye. Okay, so this is the picture that I actually took of this is the iPhone Parmesan. So this is the picture that I actually took. So I'm gonna start you off by just saying, first of all, clean your lens on the camera. You don't really think about it when you're taking a picture. I know I don't think about it very much, but it's actually pretty important because our hands are all over it all the time. You also want to know where your camera lens is. So when you're taking a picture, especially when you're doing a straight on, you may not realize, you know, like that you're tipping it. And sometimes you have absolutely no choice but to tip it a little bit because of the, you know, where you're seated or the angle that the food is at. There's nothing saying that you cannot flip the camera over and take it that way. And you can definitely do that in that Lightroom. So I actually suggest that for flat on pictures because it makes things a lot easier. Now this is what we call a flat lay that you're looking at. And that's when we're going overhead. And I'm going to explain to you how to use this app in just a minute, but I want to go through just the basics first. So before I go there, I'm getting ahead of myself. So the daylight is coming from up here. We've got the wood surface. I purposefully took this photo like this. So it's very blue. You can see the reflection, so you can see that it's a reflective plate. It's a salad plate. And the textured napkin. So these are all the things that I was mentioning in the last slide. And so in a flat lay, I guess we need to skip over. We have something called grid lines. So I don't have it here in this snapshot. I don't know why I didn't take it that way, but you want to make sure that a flat lay is flat. So you could take, I've seen a lot of pictures that, you know, you're attempting to do it flat on and you're actually angled and you don't realize it. And it's very easy to do. I mean, you can very easily do that with a DSLR camera as well. So the grid lines really help with balance. So you can, it will come across here, here, and then here and here. So you're going to have 9 boxes. And it's also something called the rule of thirds. So this is not, this is a centered picture. But the rule of thirds is actually something like this. So we've got a third, and a third of the picture, and your eye goes to the last third of the picture. So the grid lines help you to recognize that. Taking a picture and having it off to the side is actually more pleasing to the eye. So keeping that in mind when you've got those grid lines up and you're setting up your flat lay, you can actually shift it over and you can follow those grid lines and pull yourself in. Now you can do like what I did here, and I just cropped the whole thing. So sometimes it's better to crop because then you have more control over it. Another little, just one little tip, if you're shooting for Instagram story, there is an aspect ratio. And so if you go to these 3 little dots, I'm sorry I don't have a picture of this, but if you go to these 3 little dots here, it pulls a little menu and it will say aspect ratio. And if you go to 16.9 or 16:9, it's like 16:9. That's for an Instagram story. So if you're specifically planning to use that for an Instagram story, you won't have to crop it or anything. It'll be perfectly shot and ready to go. For anything else, I would suggest just shooting it in an aspect ratio of 3.2, and that's usually the default anyway. So this little button here, if you're taking notes, will pull up the aspect ratio, and you can select. There are actually quite a few that you can select, and you can play with it. One thing I wanted to note while we're talking about the different modes is on iPhone, sorry. On iPhone, the portrait mode is kind of like having a, and if you're at all familiar with photography, it's your aperture. So it's basically how things look blurry in the background in a picture and more clear up front. So portrait mode can do that for you if you're looking to do something like that. Lightroom does not have this capability, but it is something I wanted to mention. I've used it a few times, and I like it for certain things. It does basically tell you how far to stand away, but it isn't a true aperture, so it's only it's like a mask. It's like putting on a mask on the photo. And so if you use it, keep in mind that things like straws or drinks that are clear in the background, sometimes they can look like they disappear completely. So just be careful if you play with that. That isn't a true thing. Okay, so next you want to shoot in DNG. And again, that's right here, and this little menu here would actually tell you. Sorry. You want to use your, okay, so here when you pull down, I think I need to pull this up on my phone. I'm so sorry. Just so I can see. Sorry, I didn't print a slide for this one. So if you go to, I'm going to show you on here. So I don't know if you can see it, but if you do the pull down here, it will tell you there's automatic, professional, and high dynamic range. I've never used high dynamic range. Automatic is basically going to be like using your camera phone, or your iPhone. So always select professional so that you can play with it. And then you're going to go to exposure, and the exposure, you can actually expose your picture, so see how white it is and then how dark it is. So that's basically all that does. I suggest if you're going to play with anything, you're going to play with your white balance or your exposure. Your ISO, that's a professional thing, and that has to do with the light as well. And the light is, so what happens if you increase your ISO, you're going to be letting in more light to your picture, but it's going to become more grainy. So you have to keep that in mind when you are, I'm so sorry, my dog is going to ruin my work. I am so sorry.
Well, welcome to working from home.
I'm so sorry. She was driving me crazy. Okay, so your ISO is going to let in more light. So if you increase your ISO, it's going to let in more light. But once you take the picture, it's going to be a lot more grainy the higher the ISO goes. So my suggestion is to keep that on auto for you guys. The other thing that you can play with is the white balance, and I do suggest doing that. And this has little pictures, so when you pull it up, when you touch your white balance there, you can see that there's just little pictures. And so one's like, if it's sunny, if it's cloudy, if you're inside, if you're outside. But the other thing that you can do is there's a little dropper there. And so what you do with this box that shows up, if you're in a still setting, this is not for anything that's like in action or anything, but if you're in a still setting, you can actually find a very neutral. So what I would have done here is probably focus on the beige napkin there, because it's a pretty neutral tone. And you just click the checkbox at the bottom. And that's going to actually set your white balance for that picture. And it's going to tell the camera that that's the type of balance that it should be taking a picture within. And again, we can edit this later, but it's great to have a good base starting point. The only other thing on here that I would want to talk about are your seconds, and it's kind of like your shutter speed. And unless you're doing something that you're pouring, you're like pouring a pitcher of water or something into a glass, that's the only time I would suggest even playing with that. Again, this is going to have to do with light as well. So your seconds, if you increase your seconds, it's going to be a faster shutter speed, so it'll be able to capture that picture faster. However, it's going to let in less light, so you're not going to have as much light. So you would have to increase your exposure in order to get the brightness back in. So there's a balancing act going on. So I suggest starting at auto for everything. Now, if you start playing with all these settings and then you figure out, oh my gosh, my picture is going to look like it's like neon red or something. That's why God invented reset. So the reset button is here, and all you have to do is click reset. And again, no flash, so make sure your flash is off. And I don't know if I spoke about DNG, but DNG is equivalent to RAW. So a RAW image is what as photographers we shoot in our cameras, and it gives us a lot more control over lighting and coloring when we're editing. So when you're taking a picture in DNG, it's basically Lightroom's raw version. It's going to take up a little more space on your camera roll in terms of file size. So if you have that concern, then switch it to JPEG. You can either do DNG or JPEG on here. But other than that, I would say just leave it on DNG because you're going to have more control when you start editing the photo. So I think that was it on that. So now we're going to move into editing it. All right. So after you take a picture of anything that you're going to put on your feed, and like that question was asking, like what you would put on your feed. Anything that you're going to put on your feed, I would suggest make sure you edit. Like if you haven't edited it and it's not, pretty much everything needs to be edited for the most part. I mean, as photographers, we edit everything that comes off our camera. So white balance is huge. So again, this is the first thing that you want to adjust. And this is another eyedropper yellow. So what you're going to do is just take the little eyedropper, and what white balance is doing is it's adjusting the temperature and the tint. So as soon as you click this, it's gonna, in the middle, it's gonna show up this circle with the checkbox. And you just take your finger and you slide around until you find a neutral color. So the most neutral color here is actually on the plate. And so when I say neutral, I really tell you to lean more towards the gray, because even beige has a little bit of color in it. So anything with color, it's going to change it. So, and it's going to throw it to the opposite color, if that makes sense. So find the most neutral gray spot you can find and check it. And then if you have to come down here and adjust these, you still can. So the cooler you're going to go, so you're going to, if you go more towards blue, you're going to get a more blue picture. This one, remember, had a ton of blue in it. So we're actually going more towards the yellow to pull out that blue. If you are going to shoot in a situation where you have a choice of blue or yellow, go more towards the blue, because you can always warm the picture back up a lot easier than you might be able to take out some of the yellow. Just something to keep in mind. The tint, if I were personally if I wasn't using this dropper, I wouldn't touch the tint unless I had to. So if you're just playing, I would first start just playing with that slider. And I mean, you can slide these all the way back and forth just to see how ridiculous they would look. And it gives you a really good baseline sense of what you don't want it to look like. Okay, so next we're going to go, and so because this is pasta, so this is a pasta dish, because it is, pasta always captures a little bit more yellow than it actually is. So the first thing that I do when I take a picture of pasta is I desaturate the yellow out of it. And I do quite a bit up front. And then you can always use it back in. What you can also do is take some of the saturation out and use this luminance. And luminance, you're only going to want to go 2 or 3 over or 2 or 3 under, depending on what the picture is. But what the luminance does is it's going to darken whatever yellow saturation you have. So if you have taken out some of this yellow and you like it, but it's almost like too washed out, but you don't want to put more yellow into it, you can deepen the tone of the yellow, and you're going to slide it down. So you're going to give it like a negative number like this one. So that's what you would do with the colors. Now you can select this for each color if you wanted to do something with the green. So for like the basil or parsley, whatever that is on there. If you wanted to do that, you would do the same thing. Just play with that saturation first. Hue is a little bit more tricky, so you can play with that, but really if you just stuck with saturation and luminance, you're good. Greens can come out and look very neon. So a lot of times what I will do is I won't even adjust the saturation, but because I still want it to look green, I just want to bump down the luminance and make it a darker green so it looks deeper and richer. So those are just some things to keep in mind there. Okay, so the next thing that you're going to want to do, and you can swap these two, like you can do lighting first and then play with the colors. It would really be based on preference. But the next thing you would do is your light. So your exposure, your contrast, your highlights. When you're taking pictures of food, it's different, or editing pictures of food, it's different than editing pictures of people. Because, you know, obviously you wouldn't want to make somebody look more green, right? So, so it's actually very tricky to go from editing food to editing people. So we're just talking about food here, of course, but your exposure is your light, basically. So I bumped this exposure up on this picture quite a bit. And of course, I took this picture out on purpose. So there wasn't a ton. So this is just the raw, you know, image straight out of camera. And all I did here was adjust the temp and tint. So when I'm bumping up to the plus 77, I'm going to then take out the highlights. So it's going to brighten the image, but this right here, the highlight or the reflection on that plate is going to overexpose with it. So we're going to need to pull out some of those highlights. And so with food pictures, you want to pull out your highlights, a lot of them. And you can, of course, slide them back and forth and see what it looks like to play with it. But you want to pull out the highlights as much as possible. And I don't suggest playing with contrast until after you've lit up your picture, for lack of a better term. You want to light up this picture, and then you want to add in the darkness and the contrast and all of that. So you're going to do the exposure and the lighting first, get your colors down, get everything kind of baseline, and then you're going to add in your pop. So then this is still on that lighting icon, and I've just scrolled down, so highlights are above shadows here. And so I pulled out the highlights by sliding it back. And then I'm lifting out some of the shadows by bumping this up. So I'm basically, so see how like dull and the shadows are there. We've like brightened it right up, right? So I've taken all the light. If I hadn't pulled out the highlights, you wouldn't see, you would see this even more overexposed here. So I don't typically play with whites too much, but this picture in particular with the white plate, it needed a little bit more white. But I do play with blacks to add in pop. So, and I play with contrast. In this picture, I didn't add a lot of contrast because it didn't really need it, but I did add blacks. And the blacks are, you know, it's going to be very minimal, and you have to really train your eye to see. But see how all of this is all kind of blacks in and under, right? And see there's kind of a harsh shadow here. This is the shadow. Not all shadows are bad, so don't walk away from this thinking that all shadows are bad, because sometimes it adds to the photo to have shadows as well. But you don't want them to be, you don't want them to take away from the picture itself. So light up your picture, fix your colors just a little bit, and then add your pop. Because the pop, I call it the pop, like the blacks and the contrast, that's all going to, it brings the picture all together. So this is how it looks after we've just edited it. Then we move into cropping. So I actually suggest cropping your images, especially when it's just a dish like this. Like, this is just, yeah, that's nice, but you know, like, it's just a plate of, it looks like a plate of spaghetti, you know. But once you crop it and you get and you really zero in on what you're trying to capture, this image says a lot more to me than something flat like this. This image, it also follows the rule of thirds, because you've got the third of the image, that's the main focal point, and it's more pleasing to the eye. And you can see this shadow here that, you know, that actually adds to the image. This shadow here, these add a little bit to the image. They're not bad, so don't walk away thinking that I said don't ever have a shadow on your plate. That's not really what I meant. It's just, you just don't want those harsh shadows from like the sunlight literally pouring in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you just have this like black, you know, on the plate. That's what you don't want. But you just want to add some interest to your dish. A little bit of shadow does help that. So that is pretty much walking through how to take an edit. And I know I kind of like, I can kind of go all over the place because I have so many things in my head to offer you. But I don't want to get too detailed, and I really don't want to over-explain things, because I don't think it's the best use of your time to try to learn everything about, you know, taking a picture with your phone of food. He's back.
Are you ready for Q&A, or do you have some more to show?
Nope, we're good.
So one thing I want to remind everybody, that Amanda jammed a lot because she knew we had some tight time frames in there. This is being recorded, and we'll be posting it the next day or so. So the great thing is you'll be able to go vote, take your time, look at those screenshots, think how you plug it in and what you can do. One thing, Amanda, you mentioned was HDR. And it's kind of funny you mentioned that, because I've used it on my iPhone when I'm too lazy to edit. And it's high dynamic range, same as you get on your 4K HDR TVs. And what it does when you shoot a picture, it takes 2 pictures, 3 pictures actually, and then blends it to get the perfect. And it doesn't do a bad job. But you do need to go into the settings in your phone to adjust that. Because what will happen is if you leave it on, it'll start saving a whole bunch of pictures and suck up a whole bunch of your memory. So you want to be cautious with that.
What'd you say? That's not DNG though.
No, that's not PNG. That's HDR. You had mentioned HDR.
Yeah.
Use it.
That is a pain. I had mine on that by accident before.
Yeah, exactly. So let me go through and find out where we left off on questions, and we'll start picking them up again. Chef Kathy just asked, wonder if there's a reason you didn't show some of the photos of your slide presentation. But I think that was very early in the presentation, and we certainly saw plenty of that. So we got it there. Chef Mandy says, Amanda, what software do you recommend to edit and splice together a series of video clips and make them into a little short movie? So in essence, what is your go-to video editing transition or editing software? I'm looking for some nice little effects to transition and to help with splicing the frames together and or cutting out scenes I do not want in the video. Also would love to have voiceover and some music to truly tell the story. Thank you again for your thoughts.
I'm not a videographer. I'm definitely not a videographer, but I've actually done this for someone just recently in your group. I'm a Mac girl, so I use iMovie. It's a really simple program. That's really all I can say on video stuff. Is I use anything Apple. I use.
Well, and I would say the same. I'm not a videographer, but I also use iMovie, and I'm not going to put it up here because we got a lot of questions to go through, but on my day-to-day life, I do a lot of stuff when I'm playing around with Zoom just to keep all the other team entertained. And I actually took a little quick video shot of myself in the home office with the phone sitting in front of my computer. I showed it to you. Yeah. And so it looks like I'm actually sitting in my office, and then all of a sudden, while I'm on these conversations like this, you see me open up the door behind me and just wave at the camera.
I told my husband about that. I told my husband that you did that.
So if anybody, if we have enough time at the end, I'll throw that up there as my background. You can see how we did that. So Chef Kathy says, adds to that, seeing some of your work now, nice. So we did address that. Chef Karen says, typically as personal chefs doing a weekly cook date for clients, you don't have the time or opportunity to plate dishes. We're usually plating food in the Pyrex. There's really no styling involved. How do you recommend photographing these dishes to make them look good?
To be honest with you, it's going to be an extra step, but in my opinion, what you would want to do is, if you're making, food for the masses, take just a little bit aside, put it aside, and even when you get home, when you have a moment to take the picture, instead of trying to take it in the Pyrex, and because, you want people to know what their experience will be, not necessarily how it's going to be. I mean, there's an appropriate space for how it's going to be delivered as well. I don't want to discount that. But if you want to showcase the dish itself, and you know that it could be a beautiful dish, I would say take a little, set it aside, and plan to shoot it a little bit later or before you even walk out the door, or whatever the case may be. That would be my recommendation. In terms of shooting the whole masses, like say, you're creating like a week's worth of meals and you've got them all lined up and it looks nice. What I think the best thing to do is remember your lighting, line them up, and an angled picture. This is when you don't really want to flat lay and you don't want to come straight on. So you don't want to, you actually want to take it and you want to have an angle to it, so that it looks like the food goes on forever. And you can almost crop it all out so it's just food and it's just a row of food kind of angling out. And then make sure you edit that picture, because that's what I see most on Instagram. Is like if half of the pictures on there that are, food pictures like that, just took out some of those yellows and brightened it up a little bit, you would be shocked at the world of difference that it shows, that it has. So those would be my two suggestions: is either to put it aside, unfortunately make yourself a little bit more work, but it's worth it in the long run to have a nice picture of a nice dish that you can offer, or do both.
Okay. Chef Kathy asked, how did you do the background in the cake picture?
That was taken in my studio. The background is actually, the color here is actually a wood grain, this was taken a really long time ago, a wood grain, like plastic, like back, like I just needed something that was going to catch. And I believe this is just poster board, is the black. I can't remember, it was a long time ago, but I know that this little bit of color here that ended up, it was sitting on, I had to makeshift something to have it low enough to catch it, the angle that I needed. And so it was like a wood grain, like plastic something like that I had on hand that I just stuck back there. So you would be surprised the craziness that is behind the scenes of these things.
Fun of being creative, right?
Yeah.
So leave that photo up for a second, because the next question from Chef Darlene says, what about the edge of the cake being cut off?
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, in food, you kind of want that feeling of it, something going on forever. And you can have that, it's an artsy thing, kind of. There's a time to not have it cut off, and there's a time to, and it also goes in with the rule of thirds. So if you're trying to catch that yum factor right there, that's the third of the picture. It's better to have your eyeball there than to catch the whole cake. And then if this was just over just a little bit, it's not going to be in that thirds, and it's going to look off. It's going to look funny. I'll actually crop some of my images just for that factor, but I can think of like like a flat lay shot that I did of a fruit, like a fruit cake type thing. It just had all fresh fruit on it lined up. And then in the background, underneath, like I had it propped up. So you have fruit all around on the floor behind it, basically, or the countertop behind it. And the fruit, you want the fruit to look like it's rolling off the edge. So you cut off some of the fruit. Like you're seeing some of the fruit, and then you're seeing like half of a raspberry and half of a straw, you know, like a teeny piece of a blueberry. So there are times when you want to cut it off.
Perfect. And then Chef Mandy asked, what software do you advise for slideshows?
Slideshows of what? Like, so my, slideshows, you could throw it in PowerPoint.
I'm going to ask Chef Mandy to come back and clarify that one.
Yeah, it would really depend on what you're trying to do with it.
Okay. And so we're waiting on that. Chef Heidi says, so this app can be used on, I'm presuming talking about Light Shop. So this app can be used on a phone or tablet and using photos taken by a phone.
Yes, so there's a button in there to use the camera through the Lightroom app.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't have to necessarily go through your phone app itself to do it. You go right to Lightroom and shoot from there.
Yes, and that's what I suggest and it's a great way to compile just your, just the pictures that you really want to like critique and keep in a special place, because it actually holds them in there too. And make sure that you shut off the feature that auto loads all your pictures into Lightroom. There's going to settings when you first open it up, and because it will dump all your pictures from your phone onto that app. You don't necessarily want that. You just want to keep the pictures that you're making nice and editing and ready. And then you save it to your camera roll and you're good to go.
Okay. Chef Joel just gave me a great idea for a future webinar, but I'll ask his question because maybe you can help with that as well. Is there an online class or a real class that you would suggest for me to take in regards to food styling?
Food styling specifically. There's a lot of books about food styling, to be honest with you. Let me just look 1 second. If you want YouTube, I would say Joni Simon. And it's called The Bite Shop, BITESHOT. She's a professional food photographer, but she does talk a lot about styling as well, and lighting and everything I just talked about. I've used her before in the past.
You know, and to that point, I know we've had stylists at our conference in the past, so I think I'm going to tap Vince too, just to see. But I think to Chef Joel's question, that would be a great webinar topic too. So
yeah, it would be. Yeah, that'd be
good overviews. Cool. Chef Mandy asks one more question. When taking pics with your phone, Android, how do you feel about using the food filter that comes in with the phone camera software built in? And I think that's an Android specific. I haven't seen it on my iPhone.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything like that on the iPhone, but personally, I don't like filters. I actually meant to mention that in the editing portion. So unless you have a very specific style of food that you've already established, or style of picture that you've already established yourself in your brand, I can think of one place in particular that no matter what they do, I can tell she always uses a special filter when she takes pictures of her like baked goods. And it's nice, like it does the job for them, and she takes a decent picture. So I would never tell her don't use that. But unless you've already done that and established that and are really comfortable using it, I don't like filters. I'd say edit your picture and you'll end up having your own style once you start editing things on your phone a little bit. You'll be like, oh, well, I like things a little bit darker. I like things a little bit lighter. And it's a lot better than just slapping a filter on it. You know, it just makes it more personal too.
Great. And then Chef Kathy asks again, what exactly is the name of the app you were using?
Lightroom.
Right, Lightroom. And that is available for Android and iPhones both, correct?
Yes, and it's free on your phone. In on your computer, I don't know if it's free on iPad. I've never tried to use it on iPad, but on your computer, it's part of the Adobe suite. So you would have to have, you have to pay for that. But on your phone, it's really cool that they offer it for free. So
I have it on mine, so I know exactly what you're saying. It's
yeah.
great. Chef Mandy asking, what software do you advise to store all these images in? They can suck up a lot of storage.
I personally, I use Dropbox for storing things like that, going back and forth, because I have it on my phone and on my desktop and online. So it's all connected, so that if I need to grab something off of the computer and I'm on my phone, I can do that. So that's what I use. There's so many, platforms out there for storage, but if you're not a, professional photographer, you could even have just a free version of Dropbox and be fine with it. It works the same. You just get less storage space. But if you're not storing I'm storing thousands and thousands of raw images, then that's when you have to pay for storage. So.
And it's easy to categorize too. You can create folders and
Yeah, and it's nice because you can do on your computer, you can have it my computer is completely, I can't put anything else on my hard drive. So I have to, if I need to move a file over to something else, I have to put everything online, and you can do that just clicking, and you move everything to your Dropbox, but it's still visible on your desktop. So it's really a nice feature.
Nothing like cloud storage.
Yeah.
Chef Cheryl asked, do you have an opinion on light boxes for food photos?
Oh, I've used those before. I find them difficult to use because I feel like I'm scrunching a mini, but I think that's a great way to play with lighting and to start to understand how to light things. I think that's great.
Cool. Chef Mandy came up with a clarification on slideshows. He's asking about slideshows, the food pics of different stages of a certain picture. So if I want to make a slideshow of this to show the making of a certain dish, or a slideshow of my types of dishes that I cook within the personal chef services.
Okay. So if you're making a slideshow for Instagram or something like that, I would think just throw those images up. But if you're doing it for your website, I would think it depends on what kind of website you have. But I would think you can do a slideshow within the pictures on the platform that you have. I know with mine, it just has a running slideshow. I would think you would want to do that instead of using an external. I could say use CloudSpot is what I use for my my images, my image galleries, and you can do a slideshow on there. So, it would be hard to say. It's hard to know when I don't know the software.
Okay, that's fair. And maybe if we come up with something, I can always push it out to the members at some point.
Yeah,
well.
For me, in my mind, I would say if she's talking about doing a blog post, I would say put the images into your thing, and if you want to do a slideshow, you just select the multiple image slideshow within your blog post
and just photo within the posting itself.
Yeah, I wouldn't do an external one. I don't feel like that would be. It's an extra step for people to look at it. I don't think that they would.
Great. And Chef Carla asks, when plating food, do you strongly recommend white plates most times, or can certain colors and designs be used with certain backgrounds?
So you have to be really careful if you want to use a design. Designs I don't recommend, especially when you're using your phone and that type of thing. I suggest white because it's the easiest thing to work with in terms of basic photography. But you could do something Like I'm getting ready to shoot a chicken, like a roasted chicken, and I'm going to use like a black slate background to give it a really dark, and use yellow lemons, and so there are times to use. It just depends on the style of photo that you want, but I suggest starting with white because I think it's the easiest thing to start with to learn, and then you can kind of expand from there. But I don't recommend patterns. Like, patterns do not help your photo at all.
Very true. I was doing a TV thing a couple of weeks ago, and our team was chiding me because I wasn't thinking, and I had a checked shirt on. And they don't play well with high def cameras. So
yeah, yeah, it's true for people too. Patterns, it just doesn't. It's hard because it's distracting to the eye. So
yeah.
it's simple as possible. But yeah, I would say starting with white is the best, and it's usually what everybody has on hand anyway. I don't suggest using like a yellow plate for pretty much anything unless you've got like a blueberry cobbler or something that's going to have blue and white, that can really be the opposite of that yellow. You have to just be careful about your colors more than anything, what you're contrasting it with.
Awesome. I'll throw a couple of thank yous in here before our last couple of questions. First from Chef Laura McDougal says, thanks, Amanda. Great to see you again. Wonderful tips. I can't wait to try my new photo app. And then from Chef Kathy Ferrara, she says, thanks, Amanda, for the overview. I'll look forward to reviewing the slides in more detail and taking a look at your website. She had to end her session a little bit early to hop on a call. But I did want to add a couple more here. And Chef Jacob Lewis was asking Lucas, you can tell it's getting late when I start misreading everything. Can you update where to download this particular app? And I think we said it would be in the Apple Store or in Google's Google Play, I think it is, or whatever their store is. But then the other question he has, if the pictures are saved on file, are the pictures saved on files where they backed up so it's not lost? And I think it's the auto save feature that you would have. And I guess, how does that work perhaps in Lightroom?
So Lightroom has its own storage. So like I said, I actually made the mistake of having that automatic import where it took my camera roll images and was like dumping them into Lightroom. Oh, it was terrible. But instead, it actually saves, so it's not on your camera roll. So you're saving your particular Lightroom photo in that app, and then you can export it. And there's a lot of different ways to export it. You can export it in different sizes too, which is nice. So, yeah, it saves it in its own little space, and then you can export it to your camera roll to then put it into Instagram or Facebook or whatever.
Okay, a couple more questions. I know we're a little bit over time here. You have a couple more minutes?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, I want to make sure. This one actually went back.
My boys are playing, so they're on their own.
Gotcha. This one came a little bit after we finished the first session, so it kind of takes us back to the personal branding. But Chef Bill says, my brand is hard to pronounce. I think people are intimidated to try it. It's Boa Cozina, if I pronounced it right. So I think he's just trying to figure out, is this an issue if you have a hard pronunciation with your personal brand or your business brand? And really it's about the name.
Well, my maiden name is DeVito, and everyone and their brother used to say DeVito, like Danny DeVito with the T. And I love my maiden name because it's Italian and it's traditional but nobody could ever pronounce it. And I almost used it because it's also shorter than Richardson, and the length of my name now bugs the crap out of me. Like, I hate that it's so long, but it's easier to pronounce. So I hear him, I understand what he's saying. That's why I ended up not using my maiden name. Because I went by my maiden name when I had my other two businesses, and I was so sick of people mispronouncing it.
And I think it speaks to the fact that brand is so much more than just name too, right? I think that's what you're driving home.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Another comment, and I'm going to switch back to the last couple of questions. It says from Chef Jessica, thank you so much. So many great tips and tricks. So it's a nice one there. And Let me go down here and make sure I get the last few questions where I left off. Chef Heidi says, thank you. Okay, so here we go, Chef Mandy. If you were to purchase a camera to take good pics, what camera would you suggest?
I shoot with Sony personally, and there's you can get a mirrorless Sony camera. It's, the A6000 is what I actually started on, I want to say I got mine for $500 or $600, and then I bought a 50 millimeter 1.8 lens for like $300. So all in all, it was like almost $1,000 purchase. But that would get you started, and I mean that would take decent pictures for you.
Perfect. Well, just to close this out for the night, a few more thank yous. From Chef Kathy, thank you so much. Such great information. From Chef Mandy, thank you so much for all the suggestions and guidance. And Chef Joel Shaw, thank you very much. So I think with that, we'll close it out for tonight. Oh, wait a minute. A few more thank yous. We'll throw them in here as well. Chef Paola says, grazie. You spoke the Italians in the group, so you can tell her prego. Then we have Chef Beverly, thank you for the information. And Chef Chris, thanks a million. So for all the members, again, this was all recorded, so we will certainly be editing it later on tonight. Rob gets the fun editing responsibilities, and then we'll push it over to Vince, and he'll have it up on the I Am a Personal Chef Facebook group. So if anybody wants to go back, and this is really important because I know we kind of pressured Amanda to get through this. When we talked the other day, and I said, I'm going to push this out to 90 minutes. And she said, really? And I said, oh, trust me, the members are going to ask questions. And I think we're at almost like 100 minutes at this point, and that's okay.
That's fine.
But it's a great opportunity to come back and review it.
Did anybody get drunk because I said so much? My son actually told me before I started, I was out walking the dog with him. He was like, yeah, I noticed on your Instagram story you say all the time. I'm like, great.
It is a hard habit to break. As a quick sidebar before we go off, in the early stages of the COVID, I had to fly up to New York to do a series of television interviews on all these different morning shows around the country. So literally I'm stuck in a studio staring at a TV camera lenses, no teleprompters or anything. And, my little earpiece says, in 30 seconds, we're going to talk to Amanda from WWW. Okay. Now I'm memorizing Amanda, pretending to talk to the lens. But in that, you're kind of having this conversation in your head to avoid things like, and it's just like, I got to crank these things out like this. It is a hard habit to break. So don't apologize. You've done good, as we say.
Well, I'm more comfortable behind the camera usually, so these are, but it's good to go outside with comfort. So.
I can appreciate that. But again, Amanda, thank you so much on behalf of USPCA. This is great. I hope this certainly encourages people to come out to the conference next year, because if you think you got something tonight from Amanda, wait. And of course, she's accessible. This is what she does for a living. So this little taste tonight is something that we'll have her contact information up on our site. So if you need to reach out and you want to spend some time with her in more detail and helping you get your pictures straight, because really, if you think about the fact, the quality of your pictures and speaking to the brand, the name's important, but it's everything behind it and the stories. So all the things that she talked about tonight really are critical to your business. And, again, if things are slower right now, it's a great time to really focus on that. So as we turn the corner, there's an opportunity to come out stronger than ever before.
Yeah, the images really weave together the personal branding once you start really looking at it and really drilling it down. It makes a huge difference. But there's on the slides, the last slide, I put my contact info and everything. And,
okay.
I can do like a 2-hour session in advance of doing photos. So if that's something that they want to do.
Perfect. And if you have something you want me to push out to the members, get it to me, and we'll have a special offer or something. That's all up to you. I'll leave that to you, but I'd be happy to push that out for you.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, again, Amanda Richardson, thank you so much for your time tonight. To all of our members who stuck with us, hopefully, I think a lot of people got a lot of good information. We're working on our next webinar, so I'll be ready to announce that very shortly. It's always, as Amanda was getting to yes. And then, but then we have fun once we get to yes, so it's a good thing. So,
Great.
Amanda, thanks again, and enjoy the rest of the evening and say hi to the dogs.
Oh, yes. Yes.
All right.
I'm so
Good night,
sorry.
everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.